Once upon a time, there was a fisherman who lived with his wife in a hovel near the sea. Every day, the fisherman went out to fish, and all he did was fish and fish. Every day. When he wasn't fishing, he was getting ready to fish or eating fish. One day, he was sitting with his line and gazing into the clear water. All he did was sit and sit. Suddenly, his line sank deep down to the bottom, and when he pulled it up, he had a large flounder on the line, and the flounder said to him, "Listen to me, fisherman. I'm begging you, let me live. I'm not a real flounder, but an enchanted prince. What good would it do you to kill me? I'd taste like fishy chicken, and who'd buy that? Put me back into the water, and let me go." "Hold on," said the man, who was quite happy to take this confession at face value. "You don't have to waste your words on me. I'd have thrown a talking fish back into the water anyway." He then put the fish back into the clear water, and the flounder swam to the bottom, leaving behind a long streak of blood. Then the fisherman stood up and returned to the hovel to be with his wife, and told her that he had caught a flounder, but since it had been an enchanted prince, he had let him go. "Didn't you wish for anything?" asked the wife. "No," said the husband. "What should I have wished for?" "You useless waste of space," said the wife. "Do you think this is the life I dreamed about as a child? I have to live in this hovel with a man who stinks of fish. It stinks, and it's disgusting. You should have wished for a better house. Go back and give him a shout. Tell him we want a little house. He owes us big time. If you hadn't put him back, he'd be dead." The husband didn't think that this was the right thing to do, but he went back to the sea anyway, and when he arrived, the sea was green and yellow, and he stood on the shore and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, if you're a man, then speak to me. Though I don't agree with my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless." The flounder came swimming up to him and said, "Well, what does she want?" "Oh," said the man, "my wife, Isabel, thinks I should have wished for something because I caught you. Since she doesn't want to live in a hovel, she'd like to have a house." "Just go home," said the flounder. "She's already got it." The fisherman went home, and his wife was standing in the doorway of a house and said to him, "Come inside, husband. Look, now isn't this much better?" There was a stove and a parlour, also a kitchen. Behind the house was a little yard and garden with all kinds of vegetables and chickens and ducks. "Oh," said the fisherman, "now we can enjoy ourselves." "Yes," said the wife, "now we can really live." Everything went well for about a week or two, and then the wife said, "Listen, fish breath, this house is much too cramped, and the yard and garden are too little. There's nowhere to store anything, and we're at the bottom of the hill. It won't do. I want a large stone castle. Go back to the flounder and tell him to give us a castle." "Hang on a minute, wife," said the husband. "The flounder's just given us a house, and I don't want to go back again so soon. The flounder might be offended at our ingratitude and might tell me so." "What do you mean?" said the wife. "He can easily do it, and he'll be glad to do it. Just go back to him and don't be such a wuss. If you don't ask, you don't get." So the fisherman left, and his heart was heavy. When he got to the sea, the water was purple, dark blue, grey and dense, but still calm. Then he stood there and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, if you're a man, then speak to me." Though I don't agree with my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless. What now? What's she after? Flounder asked. Oh, said the fisherman, well out of his comfort zone. My wife wants to live in a large stone castle. Go on. She's standing in front of the door, Flounder said. The fisherman went home and his wife was standing in front of a large palace. So, husband, she said, isn't this beautiful? He went inside with her and there were many servants and the walls were all bright. The chairs and tables and lavatory were made of gold. Behind the palace was a huge yard and a park 1/2 mile long with deer and does and rabbits. There was also a stable for cows and horses. Oh, said the husband, now let's live in the beautiful castle and be satisfied. We'll have to think about that, said the wife, and sleep on it. Then they went to bed. The next morning the wife woke up. It was just daybreak and she poked her husband in his side with her elbow and said, Husband, if that's what you are, get up. We must be king and rule this entire country. Oh, wife, said the husband, why should we be king? I don't want to be king. I should think being king wouldn't suit me at all. I like to fish. Well, said the wife, then I'll be king. Oh, wife, said the husband, where can you be king? The flounder won't want to make you king. Husband, said the wife, you go straight to him and tell him I must be king. The fisherman went but was very distressed that his wife wanted to be king. When he got to the sea, it was completely grey and black and the water was fermenting from below. The fisherman stood there and said, Flounder, flounder in the sea, if you're a man then speak to me. Though I don't agree with my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless. Well, what does she want? Asked the flounder. Oh, said the man, she wants to be king. Go back home, she's already king. Then the man went home, and as he approached the palace he saw that there were soldiers, drums and trumpets, and plenty of them. His wife was sitting on a massive throne of gold and diamonds, and she wore a large golden crown. 2 rows of ladies in waiting were standing on either side of her, each lady a head shorter than the next. Oh, said the fisherman, there you go. Now you're king, aren't you? Yes, said his wife, I am king. After he gazed at her for some time, he said, Oh well, wife, it's wonderful that you're king. Now let's call it a day and not wish for anything any more. No, husband, the wife said, as she became very restless. I have too much time on my hands and I can't stand it any more. I'm king, but now I also want to be emperor. Oh, wife, said the fisherman, why do you want to be emperor? Husband, she said, subject, go to the flounder. I want to be emperor. Oh, wife, husband said, he can't make you emperor. I don't want to tell that to the flounder. Do you realise how daft that sounds? I'm king, she said, and you're just my husband. Go there at once. The fisherman went away, but as he was walking he thought, this won't turn out well at all. It's outrageous for it to be emperor. The flounder's going to be sick and tired of this before the end. When he got to the sea, it was all black and dense, and a strong wind whipped across the surface and made the water curdle. Then the fisherman stepped forward and said, Flounder, flounder in the sea, if you're a man, then speak to me. Though I don't agree with my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless. Well, what does she want? Asked the flounder. Oh, flounder, he said, my wife wants to be emperor. Go back home, said the flounder. She's already emperor. Then the man went home, and when he arrived he saw his wife sitting on a super-massive throne made from a single piece of gold. She was wearing a large crown 3 meters tall and covered with diamonds and garnets. She was flanked on either side by 2 rows of bodyguards, each man shorter than the next, beginning with a tremendous giant 2 miles tall and ending with the tiniest of men, who was no bigger than a medium-sized man's little finger. There were also many princes and dukes standing before her, and her husband stepped up and said, "Well, wife, now you're emperor, aren't you?" "Yes," she said, "I'm emperor." "Oh," said the fisherman, "great." And he gazed at her for some time. "It's wonderful that you're emperor." "Husband," she replied, "why are you standing there like a soft chip? I'm emperor, but now I also want to be pope." "Wife," said the husband, "honestly, why do you want to be pope?" "Husband," she said, "I want to be pope." "No, wife," said the fisherman, "the flounder can't make you pope. It won't turn out well." "Stop talking nonsense, husband," said the wife. "If he can make me emperor, he can also make me pope. Go there at once." So the fisherman went off, but he felt grim. He was trembling, and his knees began to wobble. His stomach was churning, and it was all he could do to put one foot in front of the other. A strong wind swept across the land. The water rose up in waves, and the waves dashed against the shore. Ships were in distress as they were tossed up and down by the waves. Though there was still a little blue in the middle of the sky, the horizon was completely red, as if a heavy thunderstorm were coming. Then he stepped forward and said, "Flounder! Flounder in the sea! If you're a man, then speak to me. Though I don't agree with my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless." "Well, what does she want?" asked the flounder. "She wants to be pope." "Go back home. She's already pope." Then the man went home, and when he arrived his wife was sitting on a throne 2 miles high and was wearing 3 large golden crowns on her head. Numerous bishops and priests were standing around her, and there were 2 rows of candles on either side of her. The biggest candle was as thick and as large as the highest tower, and the tiniest was a church candle. "Wife," the man said, as he took a good look at her, "are you the Pope?" "Yes," she said, "I'm Pope." "Oh, wife," he said, "isn't it marvellous that you're the Pope? You must be satisfied. Now that you're Pope, you can't become anything greater." "I'll think about it," said the wife. Then they both went to bed, but she wasn't satisfied, and her ambition kept her from sleeping. She kept thinking of ways she might become greater than she was. When the sun began to rise, she sat at the window and thought, "Aha! I could also make the sun rise." Then the iron entered her soul, and she became fixed and hard, and poked her husband and said, "Husband, go to the flounder. I want to be like a god." The husband was still half asleep, but he was so shocked by what she had said that he fell out of the bed. "Oh, wife," he said, "be content and remain Pope." "No," his wife said, "I won't have any peace of mind, and I won't be able to bear it until I can make the sun and the moon rise. I want to be like a god." "Husband," she said, and looked ghastly, "I want to be like a god. You will go to the flounder at once." Now his limbs began to tremble, and he was filled with fear. Outside a great storm was raging, so much so that all the trees and mountains were shaking. The sky was pitch black, and there was thunder and lightning. Black waves rose up in the sea as high as mountains, and they all had crests of white foam on the top. Then the fisherman, with a querulous voice, said, "Flounder! Flounder in the sea! If you're a man, then speak to me. Though I don't agree with my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless." Well, what does she want? Flounder asked. "Oh," he said, "she wants to be like a god. Go back home. She's sitting in your hovel again. And that's where they're all sitting to this very day. As my ancestors used to say, what has always wants more."